to another Untangled episode with me, Stuart from the Woolpatch.
And me, Jimmy from Jimmy Does Knitting.
Great to see you again, Jimmy. Lovely meeting you at H&H in Cologne last week. We're all back to it, and we're back to work. And I see you in a glorious knit there. Explain to our listeners and our YouTube viewers what you've got on.
Well, this is my metaphysics, which I wore when I saw you at H&H Cologne. It was really good seeing you. You saved me because I was by myself wandering the booth, and then I saw you and I was like, oh good, I know at least one person here. But I was wandering around in this. This is my metaphysics. I showed it in the last episode that we filmed, but as a whip, and now it is out for testing. So this is a overall intarsia drop shoulder sweater. I'm doing a generous test of 5 months, but because it's pieced, because it's intarsia, I'm having like an ongoing application period for the test. So if you are interested in joining in and making this, or doing it without the intarsia and just flat and pieced, sign up for the test. I have it on my YouTube channel and I have it in my Instagram links. So that is a quick plug about what I am wearing.
As the point of this podcast is to go straight into question and answers, we've got them, so let's go to it. Our next question we have from Sergio in Massachusetts. Have you come across any good knitting patterns for a men's coat? Not a cardigan, but something more along the lines of a peacoat. Oh, I used to have one of those that I used to wear on gate duty when I was a teacher to keep warm in the winter. I love a peacoat. Whether there are any patterns out there, what do you think? Have you seen anything in your travels?
Not a peacoat per se, but I have some ideas for this one. So, I have a list here, which I'm checking out.
I love a list.
Yes. So when you look up, there are a couple barriers to this for men's patterns for people that don't know. Is one, not a lot of patterns are actually done for men because they don't sell. Not a lot of men knit. Not a lot of people knit for men's. So if you look up Ravelry stuff, a lot of times it's just women's clothing and women's sized clothing. And so it's a little bit difficult to find more menswear. And a coat, as opposed to just a cardigan, I think is a little bit more difficult too. But I have solutions. So the Chunky Jacket by the Gray Level Knitter, we saw that at H&H Cologne in the Gepard yarn stand. It is this boucle thing that I'm obsessed with right now. And I do want to make my own version of this. I'm going to buy some yarns and do some swatching because I have some ideas, but later on in the year probably doing that. But I think that is a good option. It's unisex. Now, unisex patterns sometimes, depending on who's writing it, is written to more of like a standard women's size. Sometimes is written to a men's size, which is interesting. Some designers that you would know that I have talked to sort of off the record just do men's sizing for their unisex stuff. I'm not going to name names, but it happens.
Yeah, never knew that.
And then, so that's going to work for you. I looked in like Ravelry, I didn't find much. I did download the Universal Yarn Fall 2019 ebook at one point. There was like, they were giving it away for free. I'm not sure if it's free or on Ravelry. I did not check because it was a bit of a rabbit hole that I couldn't get into today. But that actually has a couple of jackets for men, which you could find. Is it a peacoat? No, but they have some options. Now, you could also go for some old school. And what I mean by that is Norwegians have what's called like a kofte. I hope I pronounced that right, but it's their traditional like knit jacket. And they have more contemporary ones because there is a knitting culture in Norway, and then they have some older ones too. So that's an option for a jacket that could look really nice, especially if you enjoy color work. And then my last option is a vintage knitting pattern. There are a bunch of vintage knitting patterns, and I know that there were like men's smoking jackets and stuff there. It's gonna be, the yarn's gonna be a little weird. It's gonna be written differently than you're used to, but that's an option with some like really solid stuff for men. So that is my
Brilliant.
There's my spiel. What do you think?
Yeah. Not much at all, really. I know so because a couple of years back, Colin, who is this fabulous gentleman who lives in the village where my shop is, he's a knitter, crocheter, sewer, drawer extraordinaire, and he can make things from scratch. I can show him a picture and go, "Oh, Colin, can you make me this?" And he'll go, "Oh, yes, darling, of course." He's made me so many things. If you've seen me on my YouTube channel, last year I saw a picture of Shawn Mendes in this beautiful crochet with flowers all over. I showed it to Colin. Yeah, he made that, no problems. Now, I went back several years and I saw a pea jacket, whether it was Super Dry or someone, and I went, oh my word, I'd love that. And he made me a pea jacket. I know, stunning. And I remember going onto the coast to film it because it was freezing cold, and it was a pea jacket. It had a lovely collar that could fold down, and it had the, I forget what those things are that they have on pea. That's it. And the buttons were fabulous, and he made it in chunky. It was a big jacket. I might be able to dig out the pattern because Colin did write it up for me as just a one size thing, but I then never typed it up properly, so it's probably lurking somewhere. So Sergio, you might get something garbled that Colin wrote for me, which you could probably try and work. But I'm going to put a link in the show notes and in the description below, and you can watch me prancing around the beach wearing this pea jacket. And if that's your thing, maybe we can help you out, and I'll try and find Colin's notes scrawled somewhere. But I think we've got it. Some points covered there to help you as much as possible. But you're right, Jimmy, it's such a shame, isn't it, that there aren't enough or more men's style patterns in the world of knitting. What do you think, Jimmy?
I agree. It's difficult. It's essentially what got me off on my design journey. They're either boring or they're just like not there. So it's all about modifying to make the knit fit you and your body and your preferences. And you know, for some people that's easier than others, and yeah, it's just kind of out there because we're not the majority in this one case in the entire world. So we'll be fine, but we have to be a little creative.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. This is from fabulous, brilliant Jane, who does a lot of comments on on the YouTube versions of Untangled. We really welcome your comments, Jane, and everyone else. But she's actually submitted a question as well. What is the differences in terminology for American crocheting? It's a crochet question, everyone. Woo! And UK crocheting. So what is the difference in terminology for American crocheting and UK crocheting? This would help when encountering your patterns. Is there differences in knitting terminology? Why the differences and why not universal? Okay, well, I could do this one with my eyes closed.
Good.
And I've got a little prep ready too. So if you're visually watching on YouTube, this will come in very handy. Push a button. Ta-da! Prepared notes, like Jimmy's got a list. Okay, so crochet terms. The simplest way of understanding the differences is all down to this stitch. In USA crochet, they have the single crochet. So when you're doing a pattern, Jane, or anyone else, and you spot the word single, or it says single crochet, you know you are following an American vocab pattern. Simple as that, because it doesn't exist in UK terminology. So if you've got a fabulous pattern of Ravelry, but it doesn't say if it's using US terminology, can't say it, US terminology or UK terminology, but you see the word single crochet, you then know, right, you're in US terminology. So that's the first thing. How to learn, let's go back to the desk, how to learn to translate it to UK, all you do is you add one. Okay, so the single in US terminology, we call it a double. A double in US terminology, just add one on, becomes a treble. And that continues all the way through. A US terminology for a treble, add one on, and it becomes a double treble. Now, that might be still gobbledygook for some of you, but when I show you and explain the reason between the two, Jimmy, people are going to go, oh, that's why. That's so obvious. So here goes. Right, let's go back. Okay. Why do Americans call it single and we call it double? It's all about the yarn overs. Okay, so where are we? Here. I'm going to do a US single and a UK double. I'm left-handed, so you're probably looking at that all weird, but you punch through and you pull up a loop. You have 2 loops there. Okay, now it's all about finishing the stitch off. The Americans call it a single because I'm yarning over and pulling through once, one single time. Okay, that's why they call it a single. Remember? So punch through, pull up a loop, here we go, yarn over, single. Now, we call it double for a different reason. And I perhaps think I can understand why we call it a double, and I understand it, and it's a very good reason. Whether it's better than the single reason, I don't know. But here we go. We call it a double because we're going to do the same thing again, punch through, pull up a loop. But it's all about the loops on the hook. We call it a double because there are 2 loops on the hook. That's a double. Yarn over, finish it off. So it's either about the loops on the hook or how many yarn overs. So if we now do a US double or our treble, here we go. Yarn over first, punch through, pull up a loop. Here we go, finishing off. Okay, American style. Yarn over, go through once, yarn over, go through twice. So that's why the Americans call it a double, because we went through 2 times, double. And now you can probably work out why we call it a treble rather than a double. Remember, I said it's all about the loops on the hook. Yarn over, punch through, pull up a loop, and there we have it. 3 loops on our hook, not the 2, because when we punched through and pulled up a loop, that's our double crochet. We yarn over first, punch through, pull up a loop, and that's why we call it a treble. Okay, and now we'll do what the Americans do, go yarn over, pull through 1, pull through 2. We don't count that, that's just finishing off the stitch. So it's about whether you count your loops or whether you count the actual finishing and going through. Okay, it's that simple. Did that make sense to you, Jimmy?
That did. I didn't know it.
You're not glazed over there.
No, I knew that it was one more, and I have crocheted. I know how to crochet, but I've refused to use UK terminology because it's too confusing to track which one.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Did you not find that mentally easier?
I think it's a different perspective.
Absolutely.
I think it's fine.
Yeah. And of course, the double treble, if we count, remember our UK, let's put on here, we're counting the loops. So double treble, yarning over twice, pulling up a loop, double going through, that's right, going through. So I can understand why the Americans call that a treble, because there were 3 going throughs, wasn't there? Even with that big one. Let's pull that out again. So yarning over and pulling up a loop. Double, treble. You know, I know you said with 3 loops, so you got your doubles there, you see? Your double. So your 2 and your 2. But the Americans with treble, so that's 3 times going through, you can understand. That's once, that's twice, that's 3 times. So I can understand both. There is logic to both ways, isn't there? Why there are both ways, who knows? Who knows where it started? Did it start in the UK and then it went over to America with the settlers and things, and they chose to do it differently because they didn't like our way? I would be fascinated on knowing.
I have no idea. I'm not a crochet or history nerd. Maybe somebody will tell us in the comments.
I hope that helped, Jane. Thanks very much for your question. And I love this idea. Jane in New York, in the foothills of the beautiful... How do you say that word? Adirondacks?
I don't know. Adirondacks, maybe? Adirondacks.
Sounds lovely though, doesn't it? There we go.
Over there.
There we are, crocheters. Hopefully you're now going, oh, right. But basically, look out for that single. If you see a single, you know it's an American terminology. And then just add one if you're switching it around, or take away one. Okay, let's go on to the next question. What we got? Albert from Wales. Do you weave in your ends before or after blocking? Does it make a difference, or am I just overthinking? Okay, Jimmy, that's you.
I do, and I do think it makes a difference, and let me tell you why. As you block a fabric, the fabric relaxes and it blooms in some cases, especially if you're using wool with more spinning oil or vegetable matter, or like it has more rusticness. They tend to like plump up. So the fabric fundamentally changes when you block it, which is why we block our knits most of the time. So it can be in its sort of final form and fill in and even out and look a lot prettier. Well, when you have that happening, the yarn in the weaving in ends, however you did it, is going to shift. So the yarn will either bloom, which can make it a better fit and more secure, or perhaps it gets, the yarn's not getting shorter, but you know what I mean, where like that tail, you're not going to have as much mileage out of that tail. It's going to shrink in a little bit as the fabric expands and moves and stuff. So I think personally that if you weave it in before blocking, you're going to have more secure ends. It's going to be a little bit more seamless, and I just think it's going to work better. That is my personal preference and perspective. Theoretically, you can weave them in afterwards. It's not going to kill a project, but
yeah,
that's why we do it before.
Agree. There are no rules on where you do it. It is just personal preference. I would have thought many are the same as you, and you weave in your ends and then it all looks beautiful, but then you block it and it looks even more special. Yeah. And we talked about this on the last podcast, actually. Albert, when you say, does it make a difference, or am I just overthinking? No, You're not at all. It's great that you're taking an interest in your crafting work and how to get the best results. And we said there is never a question too simple or too silly or too basic, because everyone is at a different point in their knitting career. And it's lovely for us, and crochet career, it's lovely to us to talk about basic questions and questions where people have been knitting for years. It's always good, isn't it, Jimmy? Mm-hmm. One more question, yeah? What's the 20 minutes? Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. Okay, what have we got? Squeeze another one in. Stephanie, currently in California, USA. Right, extreme beginner. Oh, right, nice to know. Here we go. I have been shown how to knit both continental and English. Which method is the best for being able to visualize how the stitches are actually going together? This is the hardest part for me, trying to figure out what I am trying to do with all the wrapping and moving of the yarn. Ooh, right. Okay. That's a hard one. Yeah.
I have opinions on this.
Okay.
But, so you should knit however is the most comfortable for you to knit. I crocheted before I knit, so for me, continental, because you hold the yarn in your left hand like you do with crochet, was more comfortable when I learned to knit. So and if you learned, when you were 5 years old from your grandmother throwing, and that's what feels more comfortable, then you should do that, because whatever feels the best is going to make the craft the most enjoyable for you. So is continental or English better? The answer really is continental, because that's my personal preference, but the answer really is just whatever you want. But I cannot stress the importance, because as a knitwear designer, either in my tests or seeing other people's tests or the knitting support questions I get, reading your knitting is some fundamental skill that it's so beneficial to learn. And I think a lot of people know how to knit and they can knit, but actually reading their knitting is something that they haven't quite been able to figure out yet. So I think just taking the time and figuring out what feels comfortable in your hands, what feels comfortable in your body, and then the anatomy of the stitch itself, then things will start to make sense and demystify and feel better for you. What do you think, Stuart?
Absolutely. Visualizing how the stitch is made and what you're actually doing and looking at it. Now, when I do my teaching, and it's only just come to me as I was thinking, and I'm just going to quickly see if I've got anything I can... Let's try and do it with the crochet hook, is make up silly stories or songs. So here we go, Stephanie. You said which method is the best for being able to visualize how the stitches are actually going together. Now, can you remember, Jimmy, the idea of, it's a bit gruesome, strangle, scoop out the guts, cut the head off? Have you ever done that? Whatever it's called. Can you remember?
Something like that. I think I heard it in Stephen West doing a tutorial for one of his things or something like that. But there is a method to it where you can kind of
absolutely
come up with the story.
So let's just get the we got some nice Addy needles from Cologne as a little gift, and they had the cool laser machine there, and look what they were able to do. Look how cool that is.
Where was that?
I know, on the Addy.
I want a pair.
It was on the Addy stall, so I've got my own personalised wool patch needle. Right, here we go. Can't get it out of the packet now. Let's see if we can just quickly mock up something. That's what have we got to do? That's a stitch there. Okay. So Stephanie, to help visualize what you're actually doing with the whole wrapping and turning, it would be, I can't remember what I used to do with my little ones when I were teaching them at the shop, it would be, and I'm sure people will know this and pop it in the comments, but it would be stab. So stab someone first. So you stab them, and then you also, so if we're doing it English style, you then strangle them, and then with the right needle you scoop out their guts by scooping it out, and then chop the head off. That's what I can remember. And then you just keep practicing that. So you would go back, so you put your stitch. Can I let's try and pick up a couple of stitches. There we go. Oh no, that's not an actual stitch, is it, Stuart? If we just make one up. So that you would do it again. So you'd practice, so you'd stab them front to back as if you were stabbing, strangle them, scoop out the guts, chop their head off. So that was a good way of when you are trying to learn what you're doing, because I can understand that you've got all these stitches on, because when you are when if I come back to this, Jimmy, you might be able to, when you are knitting, there are different, and I'm sorry, listeners, this is not making much good listening, but it's, do you use your left hand more or do you use your right hand more? So for example, when you wrap the yarn, some people like moving or visualizing this left needle to go up and over and out. But some people's brain like the idea of using the right needle and bringing the right needle, the scooping out of the guts, bringing the right needle up and then pulling it away. It is exactly the same action, but I found in my teaching, some people struggle with which hand is moving. And that's where the story, the idea of stabbing, strangle and scoop the guts out, they understand the process of bringing the right needle up and towards you rather than the left needle up and over. Does that make sense, Jimmy?
It does. I think it fully depends on your knitting style. When I taught myself how to flick earlier this year, I used my left needle a lot more to gain that leverage, and so that my right hand didn't move as much because of how I was holding the yarn. Because if I moved my right hand with flicking a lot, it would really, I'd drop it and I would lose the tension. But when I knit continental, I sort of like twist them. I'm a picker, so I like almost pick and twist.
Yeah. So you're like that sort of thing.
Yeah, something more like that.
It's, I tell you what's interesting though as well, is how styles change. And Stephanie, you will find this, that over time, so I've now gone from the English style to a very much a picking style. So if you watch, and I thought I'd made this up, but it's not, it's actually a known technique. So I'll have my stitch and I'll come in and I actually use the right hand. So I actually don't throw. So you know how we said strangle, and as if you're strangling that someone's neck, I actually like a clock and a pendulum, I think people call it flicking as well, but I actually use my left hand, and I think you said this, Jimmy, didn't you say you use your left hand more? And it pushes the right hand to catch the yarn. Can you see how that does that? So my right hand actually doesn't throw the yarn at all anymore. It's the left hand pushes the needle quick and it's caught. Can you see that? And then I go up and over. And I actually get really quite quick with that. And there's little action. Can you see how it catches it? Uncaught, catches it. Uncaught, catches it. And it just, in the long run, I think it helps less pressure of that hand. Maybe it stops some, we talked about this before, didn't we? Repetitive strain, injury, and you find your ways. And I thought I was really unique with developing this pendulum pick way, but actually I've now since realised that lots of people do it that way.
Yeah, so I mean, that's great for the first part of the question. What feels comfortable with your body? That's the way that you should knit. There's no good or bad. There's some really crazy styles of knitting, which we could also get into, which is a totally separate question for a different day. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just find what's good for you. It does take a lot of playing around, and it takes a lot of repetitive playing around before it gets comfortable and before it becomes second nature. So it will feel awkward when you trial a new way, and they've just got to keep going with it, haven't they, Jimmy? Because it doesn't feel natural until a good few weeks of doing it over and over and over again.
Yep. And totally, that's how you got to do it. And I would recommend, if you really want to learn how to read your knitting, is knit like a swatch. Stockinette is the easiest, and make a mistake. Make a mistake, drop a stitch, do something where you have to fix it, because then you really have to understand the stitch anatomy and how things are going together, and then you can start understanding kind of like, when I make this movement, it's achieving this, which when I, pick back up or something, that's really the same sort of thing. So I would recommend making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we covered a lot of bases there today, and that's still only 32 minutes long.
Perfect.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant questions. Keep them coming in. There is a link in the description below. We've often got it on our Instagram pages. Jimmy, what are you on Instagram and YouTube?
Jimmy Does Knitting on both.
Brilliant. You can find it there, and we're often posting the link too. We love your questions, and we, as I say, we normally do 3 or 4 an episode. Keep them coming in, and every now and again we'll have a little bonus chat at the end when we talk about our whips. Some of you might have noticed that that green material, green fabric, that's from something I frogged from Finish It February. So I frogged it at last, Jimmy, so I'm about to start a new one. That will be good. So I might have a whip to talk about soon. Nice. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you again on the next podcast, won't we, Jimmy?
Yep, catch you later.
Cheers. Ta-ra.
Bye.